By the first week of December, the Wyoming wind had scraped every soft thing from the country. It drove loose snow over the red basin in long white ribbons. It found the cracks between barn boards, rattled the iron latch on the well house, and worried at the cottonwoods until their bare branches clicked like old bones. The cattle stood with their backs to it, heads lowered, frost whitening the hair around their eyes. Wade Holloway had learned not to argue with such weather. He rose before daylight, broke the ice in the troughs, counted the herd, and carried hay to the weaker animals. He worked with his collar turned high and his hat pulled low. By noon, the cold had stiffened the leather of his gloves. By evening, it had settled into the joints of his hands. There had once been another pair of hands beside his. Ben had been younger by 7 years and quicker at nearly everything. He could rope a calf before Wade had finished setting his loop. He could make their mother laugh even when the roof leaked and the flour barrel stood empty. He could also leave a gate unlatched, forget a promise, and dream about places beyond the basin while Wade repaired whatever had been neglected. 15 years earlier, they had stood in the same barn and fought over the ranch. Ben wanted to sell his share after their mother died. Wade called him selfish. Ben called Wade afraid. The words that followed had been meaner than either man intended, but neither took them back. Ben rode east before sunrise. Wade stayed. The ranch survived drought, fever, 2 cattle crashes, and a winter that killed half the herd. Wade survived with it. He replaced rotten posts, paid the taxes, and slept in the same narrow room where he had slept as a boy. Ben sent 2 letters during the first year. Wade returned the first unopened. He burned the second in the stove. No third letter came. That December evening, Wade finished his final count beneath a sky the color of hammered lead. Another storm was moving down from the mountains. He could smell it in the air and see it in the restless shifting of the horses. He had nearly reached the house when he noticed the barn door. It stood open the width of a hand. Wade stopped. He never left it that way. He rested one gloved hand on the revolver at his hip and listened. The wind pushed through the gap, carrying a faint scrape from inside. It might have been a loose board. It might have been a frightened animal. Then one of the horses snorted. Wade drew his rifle from the scabbard beside the door. He entered without calling out. The barn was dark except for a lantern burning low near the tack room. Wade had not lit it. Its flame trembled behind smoky glass, casting thin shadows over the stalls. A bed of hay had been disturbed beneath the loft ladder. Someone lay inside it. Wade lifted the rifle. The figure was a woman, curled on her side with her back against the boards. Her dress was wet nearly to the waist. Strands of dark hair had frozen against her cheek. One boot was missing, and the stocking beneath it had been wrapped with a strip of torn cloth. She was asleep or unconscious. Something moved beneath her coat. Wade stepped closer. The woman woke with a sharp breath. Her eyes opened, wide and gray in the lantern light. She saw the rifle and tightened both arms around the bundle pressed against her chest. A child gave a small, tired cry. The woman pulled back the edge of the coat. A little girl, perhaps 18 months old, stared at Wade with solemn blue eyes. Her cheeks were raw from the cold. One tiny hand clutched a wooden horse, its legs worn smooth and one ear broken away. Wade forgot the rifle. He knew every cut in that horse. He had carved it with his father's knife when he was 12 years old. He had given it to Ben after the boy fell from the hayloft and broke his arm. Ben had carried it in his pocket for years, even after he became old enough to be ashamed of toys. Wade slowly lowered the barrel. "Where did you get that?" The woman's lips trembled before sound came. "From Ben Holloway." The wind pressed against the barn. Wade set the rifle against the wall. The woman watched his hands as if she expected him to raise it again. "He said you would know it," she whispered. Wade looked at the child. The girl held the horse against her chest. "Where is he?" The woman's eyes dropped. Dead. For a moment, nothing in the barn moved except the lantern flame. Wade heard the horses breathing. He heard snow skitter across the roof. Somewhere beyond the walls, a loose length of chain struck wood in a slow, uneven rhythm. He crouched beside the hay. The woman flinched when he reached for the child. "I'm taking her to the house," he said. "You cannot stay here." She looked toward the open door, then at her missing boot. "I can walk. You already did too much of that." He held out his arms. After a long hesitation, she gave him the little girl. The child weighed almost nothing beneath the damp coat. Her head settled against his shoulder. The wooden horse pressed between them. Wade stood carefully. "What is her name?" "Lucy. And yours?" "Eliza Marlow." Wade carried Lucy through the storm, while Eliza followed, limping badly, but refusing the hand he offered. Snow had begun to fall in thick, dry flakes. By the time they reached the house, the barn had vanished behind a moving curtain of white. Inside, Wade placed Lucy near the stove and added wood to the fire. Eliza remained beside the door, dripping melted snow onto the floorboards. "You need to take off those clothes." Her face hardened. Wade turned away. "There are blankets in the chest. My mother's dresses are in the room across the hall. They will be old, but they will be dry." He set a pot of water on the stove. When he looked again, Eliza had wrapped Lucy in a quilt and was examining the child's hands and feet. Only after she seemed satisfied did she move toward the spare room. Wade heated milk and crumbled bread into it. He had no notion what children of Lucy's age ate, but she accepted the bowl without complaint. She sat on the floor near the stove, spoon in one hand and the wooden horse in the other. Eliza returned wearing one of his mother's plain brown dresses. It was loose across her shoulders and too short at the wrists. Her wet hair hung down her back. Without the coat around her, she looked thinner than Wade had realized. He nodded toward a chair. "Sit. I should explain. You should let me see your foot." The torn stocking was dark with blood. A piece of wire had cut the heel, and the skin around it had turned pale from cold. Wade cleaned the wound, while Eliza gripped the edge of the chair. She did not cry out. "How far did you walk?" "I do not know." "That is not an answer. The stage left us at Cedar Junction yesterday morning." The driver said the road west was closed. I paid a man for a ride, but his wagon lost a wheel near the south ridge. He turned back. I kept going. With a child, I could not leave her. You could have stayed with the wagon. The man was drunk. Wade looked up. Eliza held his gaze. He tied a clean cloth around her heel. "You found the ranch by chance." Ben drew a map. She reached into the pocket of the brown dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edges were soft from handling. Water had blurred part of the ink. Wade recognized the slant of the handwriting before she opened it. He turned his eyes away. "He wrote it before he died," Eliza said. "He told me to bring Lucy here." "Why you?" "Her mother was my sister." Wade glanced at the child. Lucy had stopped eating and was dragging the wooden horse through a patch of flour dust beside the stove. "What happened to your sister?" "Pneumonia, last spring." "And Ben?" "A rail bridge collapsed in September." The answer came without ornament. Eliza folded the letter again. "Ben cared for Lucy alone after Rose died. I moved into their room and helped. When he was hurt, the camp doctor said he might last until morning. He lasted 3 days." Wade stared into the wash basin. The water had turned pink from her blood. "What did he say about me?" "That you were stubborn." Wade almost smiled, but the feeling did not reach his mouth. "What else?" "That you had never refused shelter to anything caught in bad weather." He remembered wrong. "No," Eliza said. "He did not." Wade rose and carried the basin outside. When he returned, Eliza was still sitting in the chair. Lucy had fallen asleep against her knee. The wooden horse remained trapped in the child's fist. "There is a bed in the spare room." Wade said. You can stay until the storm passes. Eliza looked at the dark windows. And after? We will decide after. The storm lasted 4 days. It buried the lower fence and filled the yard until the snow reached Wade's knees. Each morning, he forced open the house door and dug a path toward the barn. Each evening, he returned with ice on his beard and his shoulders bent beneath firewood. Eliza's injured foot kept her inside, but she did not remain idle. On the second morning, Wade found bread rising beside the stove. On the third, the torn lining of his winter coat had been sewn closed. She discovered a sack of dried apples in the cellar and boiled them until the house smelled faintly sweet. She spoke little. Lucy spoke even less. The child followed Wade with her eyes. When he entered, she watched him remove his hat and gloves. When he crossed the room, she turned her whole body to keep him in sight. She did not approach him, but each day she left the wooden horse a little farther from Eliza's chair. On the first day, it rested against Eliza's skirt. On the second, it lay beneath the table. On the fourth evening, Wade found it beside his boot. He picked it up and examined the broken ear. I can fix this. Lucy stared at him. Wade carried the horse to his workbench near the window. He cut a small piece of pine, shaped it with his knife, and fitted it into the worn notch. The new ear was lighter than the rest of the horse. Lucy stood 3 feet away. One hand wrapped around Eliza's finger. Wade placed the toy on the floor. Lucy waited until he had stepped back before taking it. That night, Eliza set a second cup of coffee beside Wade without asking. When the sky finally cleared, the basin shone beneath a crust of snow. The world looked clean and empty, but the cold remained deep enough to split fence posts. Wade found Eliza near the door, wrapped in his mother's old shawl. You cannot leave yet, he said. I did not say I was leaving. You were looking at the road. I was looking to see if there was one. There isn't. She lowered her eyes to the bandage on her foot. I can work for the food. I did not ask. You may not ask, but I will. Wade looked toward Lucy, who was asleep in a basket lined with blankets. What work did you do before this? Dressmaking, washing, cooking when there was cooking to be done. You ever milk a cow? No. Then you are in danger of being useful. Eliza gave him the smallest hint of a smile. The arrangement was never spoken aloud. Eliza remained because the snow was deep, then because her foot had not healed, then because a second storm closed the road. By the time the first wagon passed along the southern trail, nearly 3 weeks had gone. Wade did not mention the road. Neither did she. He showed her how to brace her forehead against the cow's warm flank and pull the milk in steady streams. The first morning, she squeezed too hard and sent the bucket skidding beneath the stall rail. Wade caught it with his boot. Eliza looked at the spilled milk. I suppose you will say, Ben learned faster. Ben tried to milk a bull. Her head turned. Wade kept his face still. Eliza laughed once, softly and unexpectedly. The sound startled a hen from the feed trough. After that, the mornings took on a shape. Wade rose first and lit the stove. Eliza followed before the coffee boiled. She wrapped Lucy in a wool coat and settled her in a crate near the barn door, where the child could watch them work. Eliza milked while Wade fed the horses. Wade split wood while Eliza kneaded bread. At noon, she left a tin plate covered near the barn. He began returning the plate washed. In the evenings, Eliza sewed beside the stove. Wade mended harness or sharpened tools. Lucy moved between them, dragging the wooden horse over the floorboards. The silence changed. At first, it had been careful. Each sound felt like an interruption. Later, the scrape of Eliza's needle and the rasp of Wade's whetstone became part of the house. The place no longer seemed to hold its breath. Lucy learned his footsteps. When Wade came in from the cold, she raised both arms. The first time, he looked behind him to see whom she wanted. Eliza said nothing. Wade lifted the child. Lucy placed one hand against the frost in his beard and laughed. He carried that sound with him through the next morning's work. January settled hard over the basin. A steer went through the ice near the lower creek. Wade spent half a day pulling it free. He returned soaked to the waist, his lips gray and his hands shaking too badly to unbutton his coat. Eliza drew him toward the stove. "Sit. I need to check the north fence." "You need to sit." Wade obeyed before he realized he had. She removed his boots and wrapped his feet in warmed blankets. She placed a cup between his hands and held it there until his fingers could close around it. Lucy climbed onto the chair beside him and pressed the wooden horse against his arm. Wade looked at Eliza. "Thank you." She nodded once. The north fence waited until morning. A week later, Eliza's shoe split along the sole. Wade found it beside the door after she had gone to bed. He carried it to his bench and worked by lamplight, stitching new leather beneath the heel. He rubbed grease into the seams and left the shoe where he had found it. The next morning, his coat hung near the stove with a new wool patch at the elbow. Neither mentioned either repair. In February, Lucy spoke her first clear word in Wade's house. She stood at the front window while he crossed the yard carrying a saddle. "Wade," she said. Eliza's needle stopped. The child struck the glass with her palm. "Wade." Outside, Wade turned. He could not have heard through the glass, but he saw Lucy's mouth moving. He raised one gloved hand. That evening, he brought a small pine board into the kitchen. He measured the spare room, then spent 3 nights building a low wooden bed. Eliza watched him fit the final rail. "She can still sleep in the basket. She will climb out soon. You do not have to make things for us." "I know." Wade sanded the wood until no rough edge remained. When the bed was finished, Lucy placed the repaired horse on the pillow. The letter from Ben remained inside Eliza's traveling bag. Wade knew where it was. He saw the corner each time she opened the bag for thread or a clean apron. He never asked to read it. Near the end of February, Eliza placed it beside his supper plate. Wade stared at the folded paper. "You should know what he asked." "I know enough." "No, you know what I told you." He pushed his chair back. Eliza kept her palm on the letter. "He thought you would refuse." Wade looked toward the stove. Lucy slept nearby, one leg outside her blanket. He was right. "You did not refuse." "I nearly did. You lowered the rifle." Wade's jaw tightened. Eliza slid the letter closer. "Read it when you can." She carried Lucy into the spare room. The letter remained beside Wade's plate until the lamp burned low. At last he opened it. Ben's handwriting had grown uneven. Some lines wandered downward as if written from a bed. He wrote about Rose. He wrote about Lucy's habit of pulling buttons from his shirts. He wrote that Eliza had stayed when everyone else at the camp had been too busy or too frightened of illness. Near the end, he wrote Wade's name. "I was wrong about some things," Ben had written. "You were wrong about others. I waited too long to say that." Wade stopped reading. The stove settled with a small collapse of ash. He forced his eyes back to the page. Lucy needs land beneath her feet, and one person who will not leave when the work turns hard. Eliza has been that person. I believe you can be another. Do not punish them because I was too proud to come home. Below Ben's name were 2 signatures: Samuel Kincaid, rail foreman. Dr. Elias Webb. Wade folded the letter along its old creases. He sat until the fire went out. The next morning, Eliza found him in the barn replacing a hinge that did not need replacing. "I read it," he said. She waited. "I should have answered him." "Yes." Wade looked at her. There was no accusation in her face. That made the word heavier. "He should have come back. He thought you would turn him away." "I might have. I know." Wade drove the hinge pin into place. Eliza stepped nearer. "He still wanted Lucy to know you." Wade glanced toward the house, where the child's shape moved behind the window. He gave me more trust than I earned. Then earn it now, she returned to the house. The days lengthened. Snow loosened from the roof in heavy sheets. Water began to run beneath the ice along the creek. The cattle spread farther from the hay racks, nosing through patches of exposed grass. In the first week of March, a wagon appeared on the southern road. It was too fine for a rancher and too clean for a freight driver. 2 horses pulled a black carriage with polished lamps. A mounted deputy rode beside it. Wade watched from the barn. Eliza came out carrying Lucy. The moment she saw the carriage, all color left her face. "Who is it?" "My father." Amos Marlow stepped down before the driver could open the door. He was a broad man with a silver beard, a heavy wool coat, and boots made for streets rather than mud. He looked first at Eliza, then at Lucy. "You have caused considerable trouble." Eliza held the child closer. "You knew where I was going." "I knew what you claimed. That is not the same thing." Wade approached. Amos examined him slowly. "You are Holloway?" "Yes. I am here for my granddaughter." Lucy hid her face against Eliza's neck. Wade looked toward the deputy. The man shifted in his saddle. "There is no warrant," he said. "Mr. Marlow asked me to attend while the matter was discussed." "Then discuss it without him," Wade said. Amos's expression tightened. "My daughter Rose married Ben Holloway against my wishes. I will not pretend otherwise. She is dead. Her husband is dead. Their child belongs with her family. Eliza is her family. Eliza has no husband, no property, and no legal appointment as guardian." Eliza drew Ben's letter from her coat. Ben named me. A dying man's note. It has witnesses. Men from a rail camp who have since scattered across the territory. Amos took one step closer. "You disappeared with a child and traveled into winter country. You could have killed her." Eliza's arms tightened. Wade saw the words land. Amos turned to him. "A circuit judge arrives in Hartwell in 12 days. I have filed a petition for custody. Until then, I will allow the child to remain here." "You will allow it?" Wade asked. "I am trying to avoid ugliness." Wade looked past him at the carriage. "Then turn around." Amos studied Wade for several seconds. "Ben described you accurately." Wade did not answer. Amos climbed back into the carriage. Before the door closed, he looked at Eliza. "You have 12 days to remember what is sensible." The wagon rolled away, leaving twin tracks in the thawing mud. Eliza stood without moving. Lucy reached for the wooden horse tucked beneath her mother's shawl. Wade had begun thinking of Eliza as the child's mother, though no blood joined them. That evening, supper cooled untouched. Eliza sat beside the stove with Lucy asleep in her arms. Wade read Ben's letter again. "Your father can give her more than this place can." Eliza lifted her head. The words sounded wrong as soon as he spoke them, but he continued. "She would have schooling, doctors near, a proper town, and know me. He may change his mind about that. He did not speak to me for 4 years after Rose married Ben." Wade rubbed his thumb along the edge of the paper. Lucy would be secure. Eliza rose so quickly the chair scraped backward. "Do not call surrender kindness." Wade looked at her. She carried Lucy toward the spare room, then stopped in the doorway. "You think because a house is large, nobody inside it can be lonely. You think warm clothes make up for being handed from one stranger to another. He is her grandfather. He did not come when Rose was sick. He did not answer when Ben wrote after she died. He came now because people in his town learned he had a granddaughter living in a rail camp." Wade said nothing. Eliza's voice lowered. "You do not have to want me here. You do not have to want Lucy. But do not send her away because you are afraid you will fail Ben twice." The bedroom door closed quietly. Wade remained at the table. Outside, thaw water dripped from the eaves. Each drop struck the barrel beneath the window with the same hollow note. He slept little. Before dawn, he saddled his horse. Eliza entered the kitchen as he pulled on his coat. "Where are you going?" "To find Samuel Kincaid." Her eyes moved to the frost-covered window. "Ben's foreman?" "He signed the letter. The rail camp is 60 miles east, closer to 70. The creek is breaking. I know. You might not make it back before the hearing. Then you will show the judge the letter." "And say what?" Wade tightened the strap around his bedroll. "Say I went to bring home a witness." Eliza studied his face. "You believe we should stay?" Wade looked toward the spare room. Lucy was beginning to stir. He could hear the wooden bed creak. "I sent one brother away," he said. "I will not send his child." Eliza's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "And me?" The question was quiet. Wade took a breath. "I reckon she would follow you. That is not what I asked." "No." He removed one glove. His bare hand rested on the table between them. "I want you to stay." Eliza placed her hand over his. Neither spoke again. Wade rode east beneath a low gray sky. The thaw had turned the trail into mud. Twice he dismounted to lead his horse across swollen water. He slept one night beneath an overhang, and another in an abandoned line shack that smelled of mice and old smoke. He found the rail camp nearly deserted. Samuel Kincaid had moved north to supervise a new bridge. Wade followed. By the time he reached him, the hearing was 3 days away. Kincaid was a narrow man, with a burnt red beard and a limp from an old accident. He remembered Ben. "He talked about that ranch until we were sick of hearing it," Kincaid said. "Will you come?" Kincaid looked at the exhausted horse outside. "Judge needs to know the girls where Ben wanted her?" "Yes." "Then we had better find fresher animals." They reached Hartwell on the morning of the hearing. The town courthouse was a single brick room above the sheriff's office. Mud covered the steps. Wade climbed them with dried blood on one heel and 3 days of beard across his face. Eliza sat at the front beside Lucy. Amos Marlow sat across the aisle with an attorney. When Lucy saw Wade, she slid from Eliza's lap. Her shoes struck the floor in quick, uncertain steps. "Wade!" He knelt. She collided with his chest and wrapped both arms around his neck. The wooden horse pressed against his collar. Wade closed his eyes. When he stood, Lucy remained in his arms. The judge entered and looked over his spectacles at the child. "I see the interested parties have arrived." The hearing lasted less than an hour. Amos's attorney spoke about financial means, social standing, and the danger of an unmarried woman raising a child in an isolated place. Eliza answered each question plainly. Yes, she had traveled in winter. Yes, she had brought Lucy to Wade because Ben asked it. Yes, she intended to remain whether Wade married her or not. When Amos testified, he said he wanted to correct the mistakes made with his daughter. Eliza looked down at her hands. Then Samuel Kincaid took the chair. He described Ben's final days. He described Dr. Webb writing the letter while Ben spoke, then allowing Ben to sign it himself. Kincaid had signed as witness. Dr. Webb, who had since left the territory, had added the second name. Did Benjamin Holloway appear to understand what he was doing? The judge asked. He understood enough to curse me for spilling water on his blanket. A few people in the room smiled. Kincaid continued. He wanted Miss Marlow to raise the child. He wanted his brother to give them a home if the brother was willing. The judge looked at Wade. Are you willing? Wade stood with Lucy in his arms. Amos watched him from across the room. Wade thought of Ben leaving before sunrise. He thought of 2 unopened letters and a wooden horse with a broken ear. He thought of Eliza's shoes beside the stove, her needle moving through his coat, and the sound of Lucy calling his name through the window. Yes, he said. The judge waited. Wade understood that one word was not enough. They have a room in my house, food, land, whatever else I can give them. And if the work turns hard? Wade looked at Eliza. I stay. The judge removed his spectacles. Ben's letter was accepted as a witness declaration of guardianship. Eliza would remain Lucy's legal guardian. Amos's petition was denied. The judge warned that the decision did not prevent the grandfather from visiting if Eliza allowed it. Amos rose without looking at anyone. At the door, he stopped. Lucy was holding the wooden horse over Wade's shoulder. Amos stared at her. For a moment, his face lost its hardness. "Rose had blue eyes at that age," he said. Eliza looked at him. "I remember." Amos nodded once, then he left. Spring came slowly to the red basin. The snow withdrew into shadows beneath the hills. Green shoots appeared along the creek. New calves staggered through the pasture on uncertain legs. Samuel Kincaid stayed 2 days to help repair the lower crossing. Before leaving, he stood with Wade near the barn. "Ben would have liked this," he said. Wade looked toward the house. Eliza was hanging washing on the line. Lucy stood beside her, passing clothespins one at a time. "He should have come home." Kincaid settled his hat. "Maybe this is how he did." Wade watched the wagon disappear south. A week later, he found Eliza in the barn doorway with a length of blue cloth in her hands. Ben's old coat had been cut beyond repair during the journey. Eliza had saved what remained. "I thought we might use it for a quilt," she said. Wade touched the faded cloth. "My mother made that coat. Then it belongs in the house." They carried it inside together. By May, Lucy no longer remembered to be afraid of the horses. She followed Wade to the corral each morning and sat on the lower fence rail while he worked. He carved her a second horse from fresh pine, but she continued carrying the old one. The repaired ear darkened slowly beneath the touch of her fingers. One evening, rain moved over the basin. Wade finished securing the barn and crossed the yard. Light shone through the kitchen window. Eliza sat at the table, sewing pieces of blue cloth into a quilt. Lucy slept in her wooden bed near the stove, one hand resting on the horse. Wade entered and hung his wet coat beside Eliza's shawl. His rifle remained on the pegs near the door, untouched since morning. Eliza looked up. "Everything closed?" "Everything that needs closing." She shifted the chair beside her with one foot. Wade sat. For a while, they listened to rain strike the roof. Eliza's hand rested on the table between them. Wade placed his hand over it. She turned her palm beneath his and held on. Outside, water ran from the barn roof and darkened the spring earth. Inside, the stove burned steadily. Lucy breathed beneath a quilt made from her father's coat, and the little wooden horse watched from the curve of her arm. Wade looked around the room that had once been silent. Then he reached for the lamp and lowered the flame, while Eliza closed the door against the rain.